All right, guys, welcome. We are doing an updated tier list I shouldn't call it tier list. Tier list gets clicks though. This is more of a rating list video for the current Throne and Liberty. I can't even say current endgame because we're actually doing two ratings for this video. The first, you're going to see two numbers here. For example, Sword Shield 1, you can see a 5/5. The first number represents tier 1 gear with no arc boss, which is going to be the vast majority of you guys in global. And the second number is tier 2 gear with full bis setup, which would include arc boss weapons. So like endgame min max bis gear is the second number. First number is just tier 1 no arc boss weapons. Okay, I feel like the first number is really important for you guys to know since global is releasing, and a lot of you guys have been asking for an updated version, and we try to hold this off as much as possible because NCSoft, they buff and nerf, they dish out balance change patches quite often, and we just wanted to make sure, well, I wanted to make sure that I got the most updated version of the game. So I didn't want to do this immediately after, and also after skill specialization, we just had, and as well as the new gear that has been recently added, we just needed more time to get the gear and experience it. Okay, so this is actually going to be part 1. I have a part 2 that's coming out. I'm going to be recording it tomorrow, depending on, I mean, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, it's not going to be tomorrow, but I'm going to post it the next day on YouTube. But today we are going to get ratings from myself, JOEI, and Grenton. And these guys are widely known in the Western/global community. And tomorrow I'm going to do the same thing. And I got ratings already from Kun and the Whelps, who are both Korean. Whelps is like, he's also kind of like global Western audience, but he is Korean. So I wanted to get two different perspectives, more of like a Western global perspective and a KR perspective. So we've got that coming tomorrow on Twitch, and just check the YouTube channel depending on when you're actually watching this, if you're watching this on YouTube. So without further ado, we are going to try and get through this as fast as possible. Hopefully we can get through it in about an hour. So we're not going to be going over each individual one and explain it 3 times across 3 different people. We are just going to try and give some detail, obviously, but try to, not talk too much like I am with this intro. So let's actually go ahead and introduce our guests here. JOEI, can you give us a quick intro followed by Grenton? Tell us who you are and where we can find you.
Stream on Twitch and YouTube. I make YouTube videos for Throne and Liberty, and I do enjoy PvP centric content. As also, I forgot what am I supposed to say.
Just tell us some of your credentials as a content creator.
Okay, so I've been
and as a player
playing Throne and Liberty for 8 months. Korean vet from the Philippines, playing Throne and Liberty. And since the launch, all the way through Hyper Boost, and here we are in KR Endgame, and we're here to give you guys the latest news in terms of what's new in Throne of Liberty and the way the new meta shifts in the game. So, how about you, Grenton?
Perfect. Grenton, tell us.
Yeah, I'm a tank guy. I've been playing since day 1 of this game coming out in Korea. I'm balding. You can find me on Twitch and YouTube. I also multi-stream now, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I just yell at people when they have stupid takes, and people make fun of me because I have no hair. That's about it.
Okay, perfect. So let's get right into this so that the video isn't too long. So the classes that I have listed here, guys, these are the meta classes. These are the classes that the vast majority of people are going to be playing. I do have 2 different support type weapons here, and we are going to provide some additional information with the ratings that we have. So we're going to start with Greatsword Dagger, and I have given this again, the first number is tier 1 gear, and tier 2 I've given it a 4. So sorry, tier 1 I gave it a 3 in large scale, tier 2 I gave it a 4, and here are my ratings here. I'll just list it out. JOEI, you've given this a 3 in tier 1. Let's just talk about I guess we could organize it this way. Let's talk about tier 1 for now. JOEI, you've given it a 3 in large scale in tier 1, 5 in small scale PvP, 5 in arena PvP, and Grenton, you gave this a 3, 5, 5. So we are actually identical with the ratings that we've given it. in tier 1. Joey, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you gave it a 3.55, and we can agree or disagree based off of your
Okay,
rating.
so to get started for the large scale part in ZVZ, a Greatsword Dagger without arch bosses, and you're just wearing like tier 1 gears, it's very difficult to make plays because one, you don't really have enough gear to deal enough AoE damage, for example. That would make a huge impact compared to like the other classes like bow staff or staff dagger that can all dish out a decent amount of damage from range. So it's gonna be a struggle as a greatsword in large scale. Like even right now, UMB Kanon, even in the end game where we both have arch boss, we're still struggling in ZVZ, and everyone knows that. We know that. Everyone can see that. Though there are some times where we can make plays if we see the opportunity, and there are fat clumps, we can maybe bomb them with melee bombs, and that's literally what allows us to give the rating higher for large scale in the end game.
Yeah.
But for tier 1, it's a struggle for sure. There's a downside for Greatsword Dagger in large scale. So Greatsword Dagger is not the best in everything.
Right.
There's no one class except for SNS. That's best for everything. But yeah.
Okay, so
there's my take.
Before I talk to Grenton about his only, I do want to talk to Grenton about why he's given it a 3 out of 5 for tier 2 with BIS setup here compared to my 4 and Joey's 4. But before I do, let me just add some context to the arena ranking. I would say that the reason why, well, I personally have it set at a 5 is because there have been some changes that have been dealt to the arena. Now you can only have one SNS and you can only have one wand per team. And that has really helped solve the issue of SNS wands just running around being gods. You're limited to how many wands and SNSs you have. In Greatsword Dagger in the current endgame, they specialize in executing a lot of targets within 1 or 2 shots, and that makes them hands down the best DPS class in the arena. That would be less countered by having healers on the other team. So because they can 1 or 2 shot people, they are able to execute targets more easily compared to some of these other DPS classes who could have their damage essentially countered by a healer who just constantly tops up that player. So the meta shift a little bit with Arena has kind of led this into a very Greatsword Dagger heavy. A Greatsword Dagger at the end of there's a couple of classes that are like this. Greatsword Sword Shield, which we're going to talk about next, but specifically Greatsword Dagger, this is a class, is one of the very, very few classes in Arena that can actually carry your team, assuming you have the right matchup. Joey, if there's anything you want to add to the Arena ranking as to why it's a 5, because I know you and I are both doing a lot of Arena with Greatsword Dagger. If you have nothing else to add to it, though, we'll send it over to Grenton, let him explain his 3 out of 5 ranking for large scale. Tier 2.
Nope, I have nothing to add. You said everything that's right. Yeah.
Perfect. Grenton, why don't you tell us why you gave it a 3 out of 5 instead of our 4 out of 5 rating that we gave?
Purely for the same reasons Joey said it struggles in tier 1. It's hard to pull off anything meaningful aside from like peeling for your ball or getting people on the flanks and just executing one person. Which even when you have a Tevent Greatsword, Tevent Dagger, the only thing that changes is that, like Joey said, if there's a point where there's a clump, you can dev smash the clump and get a Tevent proc and maybe like your Frost Gaia. And after you kill someone, you're a little bit more protected to get out. But anything a Greatsword Dagger can do in ZVZ, I feel like an SNS Greatsword just does infinitely better. Even an SNS Dagger just does better in terms of locking down clumps. So for that reason, I just think, yeah, it's better in tier 2, but your role hasn't become more impactful in ZVZ, so that's why I just think it's still a 3.
Yeah, okay, so I personally, the only thing that I'll add to that, or that I would respond to in regards to what you said, is for the most part, like as far as like the role, I agree. However, I disagree with the statement that you made about Greatsword SNS can do pretty much everything Greatsword Dagger can do. And that's because Greatsword Dagger is able to set up major plays for a bomb/DPS/flex squad that a Greatsword Dagger cannot actually do as effectively, right? Because like having a Greatsword SNS, get into the backline. Like, you're right that play is, I mean, they still have the AoE stun and all that stuff, but to get it's just kind of done a little bit differently, and they certainly don't have the burst potential that a Greatsword Dagger can do. There's a clip of Joey actually getting into a line and literally killing 10 people. He got into the back line with a bunch of squishies on a tree. Greatsword Dagger, he made the play, came in, did his full rotation, and killed 10 people in one single rotation. And that's something that a Greatsword SNS will never be able to do. And for me, I gave it a 4 because it's absolutely better than tier 1. Right? Like, having double Tevent absolutely brings it up. So I can't justify putting it in the same tier or just giving it the same rating as it would in tier 1. That's my personal difference. Unless there's anything, I think it's really just a numbers thing. I think we all kind of agree with what it can actually do. It's just we kind of have different opinions on what the number represents, right?
Yep.
Is that pretty fair to say?
I agree.
Okay, so there's nothing else with the arena. I think it's pretty clear here, guys, that Greatsword Dagger is, please correct me if I'm wrong, guests, it is absolutely top tier, small tier, but when it gets to the end game, large scale PvP, it really falls off simply because of what comes with large scale. There's a lot of people around. There's lines. You got to get to the back line, all that stuff, and that makes it a lot more difficult to perform.
You just want to add one little like asterisk on that. If you're insane on Greatsword Dagger, you'll still make it work. You'll still be an actual menace in large scale. It's such like Greatsword Dagger, Crossbow Dagger, I feel like are the two, for ZVZ are two very high skill cap classes that the better you are as a player, these ratings don't really apply to you. So that's just what I'll leave it at.
Okay,
you'll definitely find a way, like some random dude running on the side, like being an idiot.
You'll make it work.
You'll make it work. Someone's gonna die.
I disagree with that. Hold on. Sorry, I agree with that only if you have the gear, because like it does.
Right. No, this is assuming this tier list. Yeah.
Like for me, if you're a fucking Greatsword Dagger, but you don't have arc boss weapons in large scale, you will never be performing at a 5. That's just not possible because your class limits you. Yeah.
That's rough. That's rough.
Okay, so 1v1s, honestly, okay, so you guys both have it at a 5 out of 5. I think it kind of goes without saying it's very strong in small scale. The only reason why I personally did not give it a 5 is because while you can absolutely win a lot of 1v1 matchups and you're a specialist in 1v1, I think a wand user, for example, Sword Shield Wand, is absolutely a stronger class in 1v1 overall, because at the end of the day, it is a rock, paper, scissors, pick your poison. You can build to counter class, but if we're kind of going off of generic builds, it's like if you see a Greatsword Dagger, you might want to challenge him, right? But if you see an SNS Wand, you just don't. So for that reason, just because I know an SNS Wand in 1v1 is clearly better than Greatsword Dagger, that's why I bumped it down to a 4. But I think we all agree that it's extremely strong in 1v1s and the role is to lock down someone 1v1, right? Are we all in agreement there? Okay, cool. So sorry, I'm trying my best to not make this a 2-hour video. So okay, PvE. Let's talk a little bit PvE here. I have it a 3 out of 4, or 3 in tier 1, 4 in tier 2, and also 3 in tier 1 and 4 in tier 2. 3 in tier 1, 4 in tier 2 for both PvE dungeons as well as PvE farming. Joey, you gave it a 2-4 and a 2-4, and Grenton, you gave it a 3-4, 2-4. Ratings are pretty similar, a little bit off, maybe like one number off for a couple of these. Joey, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you have it at a 2-4? Why don't you lead us off, since you play a lot of Greatsword Dagger?
Okay, so for PvE, there's a specific set you have to build. So you have to change your gears up. So if you're someone that's playing Greatsword Dagger, obviously you want to PvP a lot with it. So you're going to build a PvP set with it. But in order to perform well in PvE, you're going to have a specialized tier 1 setup in order to compete with the other classes that don't even need to change any of their builds. Like, for example, a bow staff, they don't need to change their build at all just to do PvE. They can do PvP and PvE with the same set, and they'll be fine. So that's one of the reasons why the rating I put there is 2 for tier 1, but 4 for tier 2, because at end game, you're going to have enough gear and you're going to hit those bosses or all those mobs really hard, and that it won't really even matter that much. You don't have to have a PvE set completely just to do PvE. Everyone will take you. You have enough agency as a greatsword. You have the Blood Devotion, for example, you can buff your
Mhm.
party's damage. You can deal a lot of damage. You can get buffed. You also take advantage of the deadly markers from your bows in the party that reduces your cooldowns even further, allowing you to do heavy hits in
Mhm.
a lot more frequency with a lot more frequency.
Mm.
That's basically it.
Okay, yeah, Grenton, can you tell us why you have a 3 out of 3 4 4 4 or 2 4? Sorry.
Yeah.
Unless there's
So,
nothing to add.
well, I mean,
Up to
Blood
you.
Devotion.
Yeah, Blood Devotion.
Full
Right.
stop. Even if you have an SNS Greatsword who has Blood Devotion, you just have more Blood Devotion uptime, which means your group
Right.
is just dealing more damage, which
Exactly.
just in itself is valuable. And then, like Rylock just said in your chat, they did recently buff the Greatsword damage in PvE, and we've had someone who's like 4,400 gear score hitting 80k times 2s in PvE on bosses. So that's 160k on the guillotine. So it's just insane, right? In tier 2. In tier 1, we don't know what the numbers are, right, with these new buffs, but I think having one Greatsword Dagger in your PvE party, even if your tank has a Greatsword, is definitely valuable. So
right. So for me, I gave it a 3. I think a 4 is a fair number because it's obviously not top tier across the board, and you'll find out why as we talk about some of these other classes in PvE. But I think for me, I'm okay with giving it a 4 actually, but I rested on a 3 simply because of a couple of reasons. But number one, there's a huge PvE meta which might be nerfed by the time this video is relevant to you guys. But there's a big PvE meta going on right now with cooldown reduction with bow, right? And there are clearly some classes like Crossbow Dagger, as you can see, which is still king, right? And there's some new classes as well, like bow crossbow, which are also at the top tier when it comes to PvE. And this is simply because of cooldown reduction. And for me, having like a bow dagger, like, again, this is everyday PvE content, right? Like, this isn't like pushing high challenge dungeons. For me, like, I would rather have the bow dagger in my group simply because it comes with mark. And I would rather have the blood devotion from the SNS Greatsword. And that's just the better overall comp. So I just feel like, even though at an individual level, I would actually rather take Greatsword Dagger over Bow Dagger, I'm okay with kind of giving them the same rating, but I just think there's just, if I had to separate, right, because I would rather take Bow Dagger just because of the marker, therefore I would put Greatsword Dagger a little bit below, because just the marker is insane damage for the group. So that's the only reason why. But I'm okay personally with giving it a 4/4 across the board. And like what you guys are saying with the farming, it's farming a lot faster now. Honestly, the farming here, guys, is the less. I was thinking about not even including this, and maybe we don't even waste time talking about this. And the reason why, guys, is because the only time you're gonna farm is in the open world dungeons, and you should be farming in a group. So even if you're a healer never using an attack ability at all ever, you will be still fine and you will still get just as much loot for the most part. So like, this is actually kind of irrelevant. So let's not actually talk about this. If you guys want to see it, here it is. But it's not that relevant. It really isn't, because you're not solo farming in this game. You're really not. And if you are,
you're farming now since they buffed it.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially on the new Toland open world dungeons.
Yeah.
You definitely need a group farm that unless you're a tank. And even
you have to. Okay, so we got Greatsword SNS next. I think
the dev class.
We have all rated this 5 5 5 5 5 5 5 all the way across the board. Grenton, you're a tank main. Why don't you walk us through? Tell us why it's 5-5 across.
It's very simple. Whoever's in charge of balancing at NCSoft plays SNS Greatsword. Like, that's the only accurate reason of why this class has been so strong from literally day one until now. It's always been the strongest tank. It's always been the insane damage. It doesn't die. If it has a pocket healer, it's now even scarier than an SNS wand. It has access to like 400 to 600 hit, depending on the amount of HP you have for free. So it's just, on paper and in practice, amazing all around. There is literally no downside to playing this class, and it just does everything perfectly for its role. There's just nothing, no one does it better as a tank than Greatsword SNS, and technically it brawls better than like a Greatsword Dagger. So it's just, it's literally perfect. It's too strong, but it's perfect.
Yeah. Joey, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I played SNS for 2 weeks. I barely lost, and I pressed very few buttons, and somehow it doesn't feel right.
And you were
Just
playing with the
walking over.
Cornelius too.
I was playing with the
Well, I
Cornelius
mean,
SNS,
he's
and I
playing
was walking over people.
he's playing corn dog for a reason, which we're not going
It's
to
a
get
corn
into.
dog shield, bro. Like,
But
So
it's still a shit SNS.
okay, so we're gonna actually move on here because this is like what everything that Grenton said is pretty much applied across the board to everything. So I'll kind of wrap this section up. The only thing Greatsword Sword Shield doesn't do as well is heal itself, and even that it can actually heal itself, but it can't heal itself like a healer,
just
obviously.
from the Q blocks.
So
Da
the fact,
Vinci,
the fact that
everything.
it can heal itself a little bit, and you're always going to pair it with a healer, it just deals it's just constantly in your face. It deals good burst damage, a pretty good burst. Obviously it doesn't burst as hard as a Greatsword Dagger, but it doesn't need to. Like where a Greatsword Dagger can kill you if you are a squishy, where a Greatsword Dagger can kill you in one guillotine, SNS Greatsword will kill you with like 2 extra abilities following that. Only it's way more protected. It's surviving a lot longer, right? And another thing that Grenton didn't actually bring up is that gear is everything in this game, and Greatsword SNS has just fantastic gear / stat synergies. Like it is one of the few classes that can just really stack a lot of defensives, hit just everything. Like a lot as we go through this list, we're probably going to talk about it. Maybe some class kind of falls off because the amount of hit that it has access to in the end game. Greatsword SNS, even from a gearing perspective, just does so incredibly well. The stats are just so fantastic. The only thing that we haven't really gone over here would be the PvE dungeons, and I think I can speak on behalf of all three of us. It's hands down the best tank to take because of 2 reasons. Number one, well, obviously it can take very well. It can tank well and survive, but like all the SNS can. But the 2 main reasons is that it deals the most damage as a tank, and number 2, it has Blood Devotion, which, by the way, if you have no idea what Blood Devotion is and you're like, what is this Blood Devotion that they keep talking about? Blood Devotion is essentially a team-wide damage buff that increases everyone's weapon damage by 50, which is significant during Liberty, for like a certain period of time. So it's hands down just the best tank in the game, even in PvE. Right? And also in PvE too, like you can build it like PvE farming wise, you could literally have a build where every ability is an AoE and you've got good burst damage too. So it's pretty insane. Best class. Definitely best class. Okay, let's move on to Sword, Shield, Dagger. This is your main class. I don't know if you pivoted from it, Grenton, but this used to be your main. Why don't you tell us why you've given it a 4-3, 4-3, 4-3 rating, large scale, small scale, and arena?
So this is my baby. I'm still not decided if I've pivoted from it. I really don't want to, but I might just have to because of how strong Greatsword SNS is. The reason it's better in tier 1 is purely because people have access to a lot less defensives in tier 1, and this doesn't have the burst potential that Greatsword does, purely because in large scale and small scale specifically, you're not going to run Thunder as a dagger because there's just too many bow players. So if you run Thunder, you kind of just int because now you just eliminated like 60-70% of the targets you can hit because of the bow passive that gives endurance. And your whole job in large scale, you're not really there to get kills. You're not the main character. You're there to just shadow strike a clump, taunt them, slow them, and just like laugh as your main ball kind of just kills them. And you just sit in your smoke screen, kind of just waiting for everyone to die. And then you kind of just do that again. So it's really, really good in tier 1. In tier 2, even with Bellandir, I put it at a 3 because it still serves that purpose well, but you're usually engaging after something else has happened. You're very rarely going to be engaging first unless you're engaging from stealth. And usually if you already have like an SNS1 who slept a clump, a Greatsword SNS with Tevent, with Bell SNS and Tevent Greatsword, dev smashing that clump and then Bellandiring is just more valuable than your Greatsword or than your SNS Dagger shadow striking that clump and then Bellandiring. So as much as I love this and I feel like it is the best initiator in the game, it just, because of how strong SNS Greatsword is, it just can't come close in terms of its value, which is why when people ask me, hey, should I play SNS Dagger? I say, hey, if you do, just make sure your guild doesn't have more than like 1 to 3 of them because you're kind of just going to be inting at that point. It doesn't have the damage. It's just lacking a lot of damage. The
Right.
only damage you really get is if you spam your counter barrier piercing strike combo. But again, SNS Wand just does that better because you can do that through protection with Blessed Barrier and stuff like that, and you don't die. Where SNS Dagger, if your evasion kind of borks, because evasion isn't perfect, I can get 55, 60% evasion.
Right.
But for a crossbow, that's still 40% of their hits that are coming through.
Yeah. And
right? So.
it's the 40% that's wrong with, like, let's say even a bow. Or even a guillotine.
Yeah, with a snipe or something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It can hit you pretty hard. Yeah, I would agree. The only thing that I would add to it that maybe Grenton forgot to mention was, like, I think the burst that you do have with Dagger would be, like, only when targets are relatively low with your
below 50%.
with your brutal incision / whatever thunder bombing. But that, again, that's, you have to have them low, right? And it's kind of like an execute skill. But yeah, I pretty much agree with everything Grenton said with Sword Shield Dagger. Joey, is there anything that you want to add to it?
I wish I could, but I don't see any SNS daggers in the server.
I
wanted to find people.
Yeah.
I wanted to find people from the enemy side, from our side. I want to ask the dude, like, how is it going? How are you doing?
There's one other SNS Dagger.
Videos. Yeah.
There's one other one who just has Bellendir. Yeah, there's one other who has Bellendir. It's a Korean. He's in a not Bear Alliance. He's in another alliance that fights you guys a lot in Interserver. And his whole build, his whole bar setup is just set up for him to go in, Bellendir, and then live, and then get out and do it again. Like, there's no damage skills. Like, there's barely any damage skills on his bar. It's just like
pure survivability, basically.
Everything.
Utility.
Yeah,
smoke screen, do his thing, and come back. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I couldn't really give it a solid rating because I couldn't find anyone to ask. Aside from Grenton, I think, but we already seen how well Grenton does with it in the early stages of the game in Hyper Boost, and he's doing well with it. But we can't really find anyone on the end game aside from that one Bears guy that's not even in their server.
Yeah, it just misses damage. That's it.
Yeah,
that's all it's missing.
I think. I think the only difference here is like a 3 out of 3. I give it for PvE. Grenton. Excuse me, you've given it a 4. I'm pretty sure we're going to be on the same page with it. It's just a difference in numbers. Like, for me, I gave it a 3 out of 3 because obviously Greatsword Shield is absolutely a 5. And I just find SNS Wand just overall, because this isn't a specific tier 15 challenge dungeon run. This is like just dungeons in general. And I would always rather take an SNS Wand than a Dagger, because the good thing about SNS Wand is that in a lot of cases, you don't need to take a healer. But that's pretty much it. Like, if you were to take that away, I would probably give them the same rating. It really doesn't matter. It's like a tank's role is to just sit there and tank, so it doesn't really matter. But that's the only reason why I gave SNS Wand, which is the next class on the list, a little bit higher, bumping SNS Dagger down to a 3. Do you feel like there's anything particular to Sword Shield Dagger and like PvE dungeons that made you give it a 4 specifically? Or
so there's a lot of mechanics in 3-star dungeons that require you to reposition as an SNS Dagger. If you look at Burkent Manor, for example, as a tank, you can't block all of her stuff. You actually have to like eat a couple of her blocks, which with SNS Dagger you don't have to do because you have Shadow Strike. So you can just Shadow Strike behind the boss. You can use it to reposition. And also with Thunder, your rotation's very fast, especially if you're brutal with Thunder Bombing procs. You're kind of getting these 10, 15k heavy attacks off every like 3 to 8 seconds. So it does a lot of damage if you obviously get the RNG. So I agree. My SNS Wand is 5 out of 5 because you don't need a healer. So it just adds another DPS.
Yeah.
That's why mine's a 4. So it's purely a numbers thing because you have SNS Wand as a 4, which is why you put Dagger as a 3. I have it as a 5, which is why I put Dagger as a 4. It does a lot of damage in PvE, and it allows you to be a little nimble with boss mechanics, which is why I have it as a 4.
I think the logic is consistent, boys. Let's move on to Sword Shield Wand. I've given it... Again, we're not talking about farming anymore. I've given it 5 out of 5 across the board. Sorry, Joe, you've given it 5 out of 5 across the board. Sword Shield Wand, you have 2, and I have as well. I gave it a 4 out of 4, and the only reason why, again, I gave it a 4 out of 4 is because I think Sword Shield is simply the better tank across the board. Let's talk about the PvP, however. We gave it a 5-5 across the board. Joey, why don't you tell us about Sword Shield Wand and why you've given it a perfect rating? Simply because I know you obviously have fought a lot of endgame SNS wands.
And I also played with a lot of SNS wands. Well, basically, So I give it a 5 out of 5 on everything because as like even in the dungeons we would form a party where we have 5 DPS, like as Grenton said, you have the tank who can heal himself and the whole party. So now you have 5 DPS and then just min max with 2 longbow crossbows and 2 crossbow daggers or a greatsword dagger in the between and a crossbow dagger, and you just speed run the whole dungeon. That's why I put it as a 5 because it can fulfill 2 roles. 1 as a tank, 2 as a healer.
As a healer, yep.
So he's already filling up 2 roles in the dungeon.
Right.
And no other class does that. Right? A sword and shield greatsword cannot be a healer. Just be a pure tank. You know, but Sword and Shield 1 can be a healer, somehow hold aggro, and just
that
and buff
joke went over their heads.
The thing is, he's buffing his
wild.
DPS as well. Like he's not just healing himself, his party. He's not just tanking the boss. He's also
providing
giving buffs.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy. He's doing all 3 things in a dungeon. That's why I give it all 5 because he can do all of these things in any scale.
So
in any scale.
So Sword Shield Wand, guys, there are 2 classes in this game where you see them and you literally kind of just not only run away from them, but you low-key run away from them knowing you will lose. And those 2 classes, more than any other class in the game, is Greatsword Sword Shield and Sword Shield Wand. Those are the 2 classes that almost everyone will see running around, that he's running at you and you just run away because you're like, fuck that. That's what that like. And this is probably the reason why we've given it a 5 out of 5 across the board. Overall, obviously being a tank and a healer, that goes without saying, a lot of value across the board. But also, for those of you who don't know, if you are maxed out at tier 2, having a Tevent wand, you can absolutely still one-shot kids. It's actually pretty. So the burst potential is still there. The control potential's there. It just does it kind of all. The only thing that Sword Shield Wand lacks is like sustained DPS. So like the overall DPS would be a little bit lower. But even that, like you wouldn't want to sit there and face tank them because most DPSs won't win that trade because Sword also does damage, right? On top of everything else it provides. It just doesn't have like the sustained damage that like a Greatsword Sword Shield can have, but that would be fucking ridiculous at the end of the day, right? So this is really a class that is just continually strong, and there is a reason why they limited both sword and wand to 1 user per team in the arena. I think that goes without saying. Grenton, is there anything else that you want to add to this? I'm assuming we're in agreement.
No, I mean, literally everything you guys said is true. What I find really funny is that SNS Wand is literally, it's like Snorlax. It's like he just waddles around and kind of does things. And it's crazy that I've seen so much footage of SNS Wand players that I don't know what it is about DPS players, but when they see an SNS Wand player, they just want to unload onto them. And it's like one SNS Wand player just sitting there tanking like 30 people while the rest of his main ball's just running around doing whatever they want. So my only suggestion, which is what Kanon kind of alluded to, hey, if you see an SNS Wand, just don't hit him. You know, especially if he has like 3 rows of blue bars, just don't hit him. You're not going to kill him. CC him, do with the rest of the stuff. And if you're still alive afterwards, then you can kind of deal with the SNS Wand. But otherwise, I don't know what it is. It's like SNS Wand is like this big taunting pole that everyone just can't resist hitting. That's why it's so strong.
So I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit of a pro tip here, okay? I'm not going to make a video around this, so if you're listening right now and you didn't know this, congratulations. I just gave you a massive tip. When it comes to any SNS user, especially if you're fighting in small scale, okay? If you do have to target them and attack them, wait for their buffs, especially their CC penance buff, to run out. Or Gerald's.
You say that one more time for the people in the back.
What is that called? What is it called? Gerald's penance? Is it? What is it?
Gerald's
well, so you have
patience.
You have Gerard's. Yeah, you have Gerard's. Yeah.
Patience. Just track that buff. Wait for it to run out. Okay. That's all I'm gonna give you. Just if you don't know what that is, look it up.
Dude, I've been saying this since I was blue in the face. Just don't hit tanks when their buffs are up.
You just wait. Okay.
Too hard for people.
It is. All right. So PvE, we already talked about it. Let's move on. Okay, let's move on. We're talking about Bow Dagger, one of the classes that I have mained in the past. I've given it a 5-5, 5-4, 3-2 in PvP, and a 3-3 in Arena. Joey, you've given this a 4-5, 4-5, 2-5. Honestly, 1v1 really doesn't matter. And Grenton, you've given this a 4-5, 4-5, 3-5, 2-3 and 1v1s. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start since I guess I played this class the most recently, I guess. But and also I have played this class extensively with arc boss weapons and non-arc boss weapons. So I've given it a 5 out of 5 in large scale, 5 in large scale, simply because the current endgame meta with large scale, there's a lot of tornadoes and a lot of flash waves that go out, and bow daggers flash waves specifically will deal the most damage for a flash wave in the game, because obviously dagger is enhancing the damage from the bow. There's a lot of you have additional utility like group protection with smoke screen with bow dagger that you could provide. You could also kind of slip through pressure with your stealth. But most importantly, in large scale, bow, at the end of the day, you will be hitting targets that will eat a lot of your damage. And having the maximum amount of range, I just feel like in the early game, like I gave it a 5 in tier 1, because in the early game, you will just be a big force. You will get a lot of kills. And if we are rating this based off of the amount of kills, then it's absolutely a 5 out of 5, because bow daggers specialize in executing targets and racking up high kills. But for me, just the fact that they not only can kill targets at range, but also have access to tornado and flash wave, it's hard for me not to give it a 5.5. I did give it a 4 in tier 2 small scale skirmishes, simply because at that point of the game, there's a lot of access to evasion, to the point where in small scale, Greatsword Daggers become even stronger, small scale skirmishes, and you miss even more. So like if you play against an evasion build, it can be very frustrating for targets to miss targets, especially when those targets are also kind of focusing on you, versus in large scale, you're not as focused compared to smaller scale. And in the arena, it's kind of the same story here. It falls off considerably at end game. Like bow dagger, just because of the amount of greatsword users that are in the game currently at the end game arena, anytime you see a bow dagger, it's almost a win, simply because of how strong Greatsword Dagger and Greatsword Sword Shield is. It's like it really struggles. It's got a great kit, but it really struggles in the arena at endgame. And in the earlier game, it kind of faces the same issues, but it is a little bit better in tier 1, but not by much. So that will be my breakdown for bow dagger when it comes to PvP. Joey, you've played a lot of bow dagger yourself, and you've also played against bow daggers. Is there anything that you want to add to it? Disagree, agree, anything? You've given it a 4.5, 4.5, 2.5. Oh, I'm surprised you gave it a 5 in arena, but go ahead.
In arena, yeah, 5. It can be a 5 simply because of composition. So it depends on what you get on your team. Sometimes you might get staff wand on your team that's cracked. So now their attention is divided between either the bow dagger or the healer. Because if they want to kill a healer, they need 2 people minimum. Because healers in end game, they're very tanky. You really need to coordinate with another player in arena in order to shut down someone's healer, and then make sure that their other player is also immobile or inactive, whether they get CC'd, knocked off the ledge of an arena, or all the types of crowd control you can throw on the other player to make sure the fight is 3v2. You know, but where the bow dagger shines then is when he has space. So if he has space, he's able to unload on a target, which is another DPS. He'll be able to kill that player and effectively still play even that well in arena at that gear. Because I've seen bow daggers with 1700 hit, man. I don't know what to tell you. They don't miss.
Yeah. Sorry. Is there anything else?
That's crazy.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add specifically for like large scale or small scale? Tier 1, tier 2. Anything?
Large scale.
Yeah.
For right now, it's 5 on the end game, because every one of the top 10 is pretty much a bow dagger, or bow staff. Yeah. Because the flash waves are just insane. 30 meters, big AOE, almost no risk. They can drop a smoke screen, pop that shit, pop it again, can kill like 10-15 dudes each time. Yeah. And they just free. It's just free. Right. It's free points.
There's a lot. There's a lot of value with smokescreen, guys, especially at the end game. Even for group PvP, people don't recognize how much value that has, because the comparison to bow dagger is always, staff bow. It's like, yeah, staff bow has more offensive, but there is significant value with defensives like stealth and smoke screen, even in large scale PvP. Grenton, is there anything that you want to add or disagree with or agree with or whatever with Bow Dagger?
Flashwave go burr.
Flashwave go burr. Flashwave go burr. Flashwave, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is a massive AoE attack, ranged attack that you can cast on the move. It hits literally everyone. It will hit you and your mother who's in Egypt. It's just fucking huge.
Yeah, so true.
It's huge.
And your cousin who's in Greece at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And it deals pretty big damage as well. Okay, so PvE wise, is there anything that you guys want to add with PvE? I think for me, the biggest value with Bow Dagger and PvE really is just the marker that it comes with. However, I will say this, there is a misconception with like, oh, with Bow Dagger, you have to weave in melee skills. If you have a specific build, you actually don't have to, especially with the cooldown meta. You don't have to come melee at all. So the dagger just essentially boosts the actual bow. And you don't have to come close range. But if you're in a non-cooldown reduction build, then you might have to. Again, that kind of depends on your build. But I think the big value with Bow Dagger here is obviously the marker, which will allow you to reduce the cooldowns on everyone in your group. Agree, disagree, guys? Anything?
Agree.
All right. We're moving on. Bow Staff. How are we doing on time? We're doing not
Very
bad.
Good.
Actually, not bad.
Very good. I'm very impressed.
Staff. All right, so we got Bow Staff. I've given it a 5.5, 2.3, 2.2. Joey, you've given it a 5.5, 1.3, 1.3. And Grenton, you've given it a 5.5, 3.4, 2.3. Grenton, why don't you lead us off here? Tell us why you've given it a 5.5, 3.4, 2.3, respectively.
Yeah, so Bow Staff is quite literally the king of large scale in terms of a DPS. Stays super far back, even with the 2-Blex nerf. It still can stay pretty far back protected. Usually these guys are building endurance because of the bow passives. So even if they get jumped by like a Greatsword Dagger or a Crossbow Dagger, they're going to get a ton of shield for free because Greatsword Dagger and Crossbow Dagger run Thunder. So the weakens come very quickly. So they're not that squishy in large scale. And by the time they're in the danger zone, a healer or, a backline peeler will just kind of peel whatever's trying to kill them off. They have insane damage. You have AoE roots from staff. You have the blinks from staff. You have flashwave from bow. You have meteor from staff if you want. You have instant judgment, instant chain lightning. It's just so much on-demand damage. You're quite literally holding 2 machine guns and just standing there and shooting them at everyone, which is why I think it's probably one of the best or the best DPS to have in large scale. And then the smaller you go in terms of scale, the more vulnerable you are because you don't have the added benefit of having 70 plus people.
Granted, sorry, 1 sec. Just give me 1 sec. I just need to. There's a slight delay for the stream. I just need to fix the desync. Okay. All right. We should be good.
Okay.
Yeah. We should be good now.
So sorry, pretty much the smaller you get in scale, the more vulnerable you are because you have less. People to protect you, and you have and you just have less opportunity to make space. So you're really great in large scale. It's the opposite of Greatsword Dagger, pretty much. Greatsword Dagger, the less there is, the better you are.
That's a good take, yeah.
Staff bow, the more there is, the better you are. So it's kind of like the yin to the yang.
Okay, Joey, is there anything you want to add to that? Agree, disagree, anything?
I agree, except for the greatswords.
I was going to say the same thing, but go ahead.
I don't play Thunder. And I kill Bow Staff. Yeah. We just removed that thing entirely because they changed the way your poison works. So Destructive Fang no longer gives us the crit. It's more like a defense reduction, right? And your sacrifice, you're gonna get bonus endurance shred versus just straight up destroying the guy without ever proccing his devoted shield. So it's like taking candy from a baby. If you hit him without thunder, you can just one tap him.
Yeah, that was probably the only thing I would disagree with.
That's the only thing.
That is true. Yeah, they did change the passive literally like in the last patch. You're right. So it's only like crossbows and stuff you have to worry about.
I think I think the meta the Greatsword Dagger meta build will lean towards not running that passive because of what Grenton said, that passive that Bow has. But the only thing that I would maybe kind of have to disagree with, it's not even because I think Grenton and I are on the same page with this, is that I don't think Bow Staff is durable at all. I think if you get caught, you're dead. Like that's just it doesn't, like, the endurance is just, it's like there, but it's like it's just there. It's gonna just lower the crit a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's like you are just going to be a primary kill target, and whoever's trying to kill you, they will kill you. Like it's not the only thing that will keep you alive is if that thing procs the shield that Grenton was talking about, and that would be that would be mainly specific towards crossbow, certainly crossbow, and possibly some bow daggers as well. I take that back. It was staff daggers as well. There certainly is, but it's not going to protect you from greatsword daggers or greatswords.
Fun fact about that as well: it's all weakens. So whatever is tagged as a weaken. So if you get taunted, it procs the shield.
Yeah.
If you get annihilating slash slow, it procs the shield. If you get Bellendeared SNS, it procs the shield. Yeah. There's a lot of things that proc the shield that are run in the current meta.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. The one counter to bow staff is greatsword.
Right. Which is
Greatsword Dagger,
which would actually to add to that point. I think that's a good point that Grenton brought up. To add to that point, it just this reinforces them being stronger in large scale and weaker in small scale, because in large scale you are susceptible to get more weakens from more people. You are more protected against greatsword daggers versus in small scale that begins to change. When it's a little bit more focused combat, people are going to probably avoid trying to add weaken you or put debuffs on you weaken, and you have more greatsword daggers that kind of focus on you because you don't really have that line. So it's just the general concept: strong large scale, slowly, just not slowly, but it just continues to fall off the smaller scale you go. Okay, PvE wise though. And by the way, arena is the same thing. I think it's even worse. Bow staff, I have it as a 2-2. Joey, you had bow staff as a 1-3. You had a 2-3. So I think we just passed that. It's pretty much the same principle there. Bow staff 1v1. I think we all have it at 1 out of 1. Grenton, you have it at 2 out of 2. At the end of the day, you don't really have defensives, and you're just fucked when you get CC, unless you disagree, Grenton.
No, that's pretty much it.
The logic is the same.
You have blinks and that's about it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, and then you're fucked. Bow staff PvE, we all have it as a 5 out of 5, I believe, right?
Yeah, that shit goes burr.
Yeah, okay, perfect. We're moving on. Bow wand support, guys. This is the best support in the game. I have it at a 5 out of 5 across the board, except for in 1v1s, 4 out of 4. Which like this is like, who gives a fuck about, like, it's not even, you're not gonna
1v1ing as a healer.
It's not even like, I only didn't give it a 5 out of 5 because I think there is a better, like I think SNS wand is a better MV1 but that's doesn't matter. But I think you guys gave this wand support a 5 out of 5 across the board as well. Joey, do you want to actually, Grenton, I think we've had a lot of Joey say. Grenton, why don't you tell us why is it a perfect 5 out of 5 across the board?
Yeah, Joey, you've been talking too much. I'm kidding.
Yeah, you talked on.
So bow wand is, and again, this is going back to the same thing I said in our last video when we did this. I've gotten to watch Eli play bow wand, and that shit just never dies. He's as tanky as an SNS wand.
Yeah.
But I think that's the player behind the class, but also it has to do with the class too. In large scale, small scale arena, it is great. There is Norgan as well, who is a Russian gamer who also plays bow wand. And if literally when I was queuing arena, if I queued against him, I was like, well, we lost. Like, it was just like we lost at character select if he was on the other team, because he doesn't die, and he just is able to keep up his entire team. 1v1, I still have it at a 5 out of 5, but again, that's purely just a numbers thing, simply because, again, they just don't die, so they'll out-sustain you at one point. But like you said, SNS wand versus a bow wand, like probably SNS wand just wins there. It's purely because it has the SNS. And the bow is less valuable than the SNS in a 1v1. You would be sitting there for 15 minutes waiting for the duel to end. But yeah, I just think it's the highest throughput you'll have on a healer. The only thing that kind of comes close to it, and actually I think is equal to it, is staff wand, but that's a conversation we'll get into later. Yeah,
absolutely. Joey, is there anything you want to add to this?
Nothing. They're both really good healers, bow wand and staff wand. Yeah,
fantastic healers. At the end of the day, anyone that puts a top healer class in any MMORPG outside of an S tier, you don't know the importance of healers, and you should probably not really play MMOs.
Everyone loves a healer.
Healer's important.
Say no to a healer.
PvE or PvP, it's fucking important. All right, let's move on. We're gonna go to a new one that's kind of on the list. Actually, I think I did have this on the list before, just to set as an example of how bad it was before, but it's gotten a lot better. bow crossbow is next on the list. I've given this a 3 out of 2 or 3-2. Then 1-1 across the board until we get to PvE, where I have given it a 5-5 across the board. Joey, you've given this a 1-1 across the board, except for PvE, where you give it a 5-5 across the board. And Grenton, you've given this a 3-2, 2-2, and then 1-1-1, and then 5s across the board. Okay, let's just start with PvE real quick, just to knock this out the way. And I'll just go ahead and knock this out. X-Bow, obviously, a lot of DPS. Bow, also pretty decent DPS, but the big value is obviously the cooldown reduction. You use marker, and then you just spam hits. You spam your bombardment, your strafing, and your quickfire, and you just boom, 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 boom. And not only are you applying the marker, but you're helping your team reduce their cooldown by spamming those multi-hit skills. And it is, in my personal opinion, outside of like the important tank healer role, it is hands down just the best PvE class right now. And if you like, seriously, as a Greatsword Dagger, where I hit for like 100k on heavy hit, I can do that fucking every, I don't know, 8 seconds sometimes, just because, or if I'm in the right group with bow crossbows. It's insanely strong. Would you guys agree with that breakdown with bow crossbow for PvE?
I definitely agree.
Yep.
Okay.
Undo P on the stack.
Let's talk about PvE now. Now, Grenton, I think I know kind of why you've given it a 3-2-2-2, and I feel like I pre-agree with you there. Okay, because I've also given because I've also given it a 3-2 in large scale. Although in small scale, Mr. Grenton, I don't know what the fuck you're thinking, giving it even a 2. But why don't you tell us? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so the same reason I'm giving it, a 3-2 in large scale, like small scale, like you mentioned, skirmishes, open world dungeons, events. Odds are you have a healer and you have a tank
in skirmishes. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Odds are, right? Like if you go to a Dominion event, maybe not, but like if you're farming
everything else, you
Shadow
will.
Crypt,
right?
Yeah, you probably have something to peel for you, and that's the only like big downside of bow crossbow is that you're quite literally even more of a sitting duck than bow staff because you don't have the blinks, you don't have Icebound Tomb. So as long as you have something consistently to keep you safe, it does stuff. That's why in Arena I put it at a 1-1 because people could just hold W and run at you no matter what. You at most have one tank to peel for you, and then the other person on your team's a DPS who their job is to kill the other team. So you're kind of just on your own. So yeah, that's the only reason that I have it at a 2 and you have it at a 1.
Right. I actually agree with that. Just so you know, when it comes to small scale skirmishes, I 100% agree with that logic. The issue with bow crossbow is that you're a sitting duck. You have no defenses. When you get caught, it's over. I just have less confidence in the vast majority of teammates that are able to actually peel for that. And also the time to kill a bow crossbow is insanely fast. So even if you did have a teammate, unless it's a tank that's like ready to go, most other teammates, I don't think they're going to be able to peel for you in time. But that's kind of like a subjective take. You know what I mean? I think Grenton and I both agree with the logic of it lacks defensive, therefore less rating. And I think that's agreed on universally. Joey, what about you? Anything you want to add to bow crossbow?
Oh, man. If any assassin looks at you, you're done. You're already dead. You don't even know it yet.
The last time I was PvPing with Joey, we saw a bow we saw a bow a crossbow bow in the party, and we're like, and I remember Joey was like, "What the fuck is this guy?" For PvP, I remember. Okay, so for PvE, yeah, we went over that. I guess we can move on, right? I think the next one is the big one. A lot of people are going to want to hear about Crossbow Dagger. I've given it a 5-3, 4-4-3-4. I think the 5-3 is a little bit different compared to these guys here. Joey, you've got, oh, never mind. Joey, you've given it a 5-3, 3-4, 1-5. Grenton, you've given it a, Jesus, wait, did I read that right?
No, you're looking at the wrong one. Go down one.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Joey, you've given it a 5-3, 3-4, 1-5, and Grenton, you've given it a 5-3, 4-4, 4-5. Joey, you are a big crossbow man. Why don't you lead us off in this discussion? 5-3, 3-4, 1-5.
That's Grenton's rating, bro.
No, wait, this is your...
That's also your rating.
Yeah, that's your rating as well.
Oh,
You've given it a 5-3, 3-4, 1-5. Yeah.
Okay, so okay, we have the same.
Mine's higher, actually.
You have the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I give it a 5 on early game because I've already tested it myself. I've shredded entire guilds alone with one spin. because nobody has gear in Hyper Boost, for example. That's the most accurate representation of early game. Nobody has any gear. Everyone's starting from zero, and we've already seen how powerful it is early game. But on the end game, it starts to fall off a bit harder because people have higher HP and more defensive traits. Not just endurance, but also evasion. And then the meta is also shifting towards more bows in large scale. So that means having a crossbow, playing with a Bellander crossbow, even if you're using Archboss, it's going against you.
Yep.
It's going to give you a disadvantage because it's going to keep proccing their
It's bow
devoted
users,
shield.
right?
And you're,
Yep.
and you're just not going to kill people fast enough. That's the problem. You're not going to kill people fast enough. But as a standalone backline assassin, if you're going for single target, the damage is definitely still there. If you're going for squishy targets for as a single target assassin, then you will 100% be able to perform as a crossbow dagger. But if we're talking about big AoE, it's not going to be as strong anymore. Yeah.
Grenton, anything you want to add, agree, disagree when it comes to Crossbow Dagger?
PvP in general, or just large scale?
Just based off of his takes. Just anything. It could be anything.
Yeah, so what he said is pretty spot on. Early game, you're actually like a one-man nuke, and then it just kind of progressively gets lower, and you have to change how you play. But I think he hit the nail on the head there, and it's kind of what I alluded to at the beginning. If you're good at Crossbow Dagger, it will be very good in large scale still. You just have to know who to pick. And the only reason I have it at a 3 and not a 4 is because of the bow meta, and because you're always running weakens as Crossbow Dagger, especially if you have a Bellandir crossbow as well. If there was less bows, I would even go as far as to put Crossbow Dagger as a 4, purely because if I want something dead that isn't a tank, even they can even kill tanks, but if I want something dead fast that isn't a tank, I'm sending my Crossbow Daggers against them because they'll just die before they can react.
Right.
That's how fast Crossbow Dagger kills. In Arena, I think it's the best, if not one of the best DPS in Arena. If you look at the top 10 rankings right now, 8 of them are Crossbow Daggers, 2 of them are SNS Greatswords. So that just kind of speaks to its power in Arena in Tier 2. And then Tier 1, I think it's a little bit weaker purely because you don't have Bellandir, but you can still kind of just 100 to 0 a lot of people, and you're very safe while doing it because you have stuff like Nimble Leap, you have your stealth, without it getting reset from a Tevent Dagger or anything like that.
Also, can I add something?
Please, Joey.
If they didn't ever touch Bellandir, like the Bellandir crossbow, then the ratings would be entirely different. And it wouldn't be so... It wouldn't fall off that hard.
Right.
For endgame.
If the queen had balls, she'd be the king.
Yeah.
Yeah, facts, bro.
No, you're right. But I think that's good perspective to show how kind of close they are. Here's my breakdown and my take on Crossbow Dagger, and please feel free to agree or disagree. Crossbow Dagger is a weapon that really nukes in the early game, which is why we've given it a 5 in large scale PvP in the early game. But like what these guys say, it really starts falling off, but it kind of transforms as a class in the end game KR. You get access to a lot of evasion. You get, for a DPS class, you get access to the most amount of evasion in the game as a DPS class, because crossbow gives you a DPS and obviously evasion, and dagger also gives you evasion. So it kind of transforms at this end game into a less burstier class, but more high DPS sustained damage type class with a lot of elusiveness. And you're just able to dodge a lot, just evade attacks. So you're actually a little bit more. You actually survive a little bit better with the amount of evasion you have. Again, this is very subject to build and what direction you go with it. So this is very general. And Crossbow Dagger just hands down has the highest single target DPS in the game. The issue with Crossbow Dagger, in my opinion, however, is that it lacks burst damage in the endgame KR. So what you'll have is crazy numbers, even in the arena, like Grenton said, but a lot of times it's insignificant damage. There could be Crossbow Daggers that pad up 200k damage, but all of their damage got healed because of a healer on the other team, versus a Greatsword Dagger, maybe they did 150k, but they executed that target securing points, which is the biggest difference. So I think the issue with Crossbow Dagger right now is that if you throw a healer into the mix, you're essentially negated because they will out heal your DPS. But if there is no healer, I think Crossbow Dagger is incredibly strong. But when we are talking about endgame, especially the better players that you're playing against or with, you will obviously have healers, therefore it falls off significantly in that regard. I think the numbers and the rating that we give it is very subjective in what we value, but I think as from a playstyle perspective, that's kind of where Crossbow has gone. Now, what some of these guys were saying as far as ranking goes, Crossbow Dagger has just kind of always been at the top of the rankings with everything. You certainly won't see as many Crossbow Daggers leading the rankings in kills anymore. They've fallen off significantly, but you still will see a few that are up there. So it's definitely viable. Anyone that tells you it's a dead class is just wrong. There's plenty of people that do it successfully, but it's even higher skill cap than it was before. So if you don't have hands, then you will struggle on Crossbow Dagger. You might as well not play it. If you are very good, if you don't have hands, if you do have hands and you have game sense and you understand this game, then you can still be a significant force. I play JOEI and this Crossbow Dagger user that's in my guild. These are probably the two best Crossbow Dagger players that I've seen. The guy that's in my guild, he's literally the #1 ranked arena player overall and is top kills in our entire alliance. Very, very good, and he makes it work. However, he's
also 5 ping.
Final thing about Crossbow Dagger, he does have 5 ping. But the other thing that I'll say is, and this is also the same with large scale Greatsword Dagger, he is utilized correctly in large scale, making him more effective. How is he utilized? He needs me as a Greatsword Dagger double Tevent because I can go in there, stun people, and between my burst and his damage based off of my CC setup, now he can do work. Now he can get a lot of kills. He will not be able to go in there and delete groups of people by himself like a Greatsword Dagger could kind of do on certain occasions, like how JOEI did against a backline with, the full CC and burst setup himself. Crossbow Daggers cannot do that, but they can deal a lot of DPS, and when they're put in the right group and right comp, they can be very effective. But a lot of you guys will not be utilized in that way. A lot of you guys, unfortunately, sorry, you guys don't have hands. A lot of you guys won't, and you guys will just kind of just throw on those classes. So that
I have one question about Crossbow Dagger for you, Kanon. So you played a lot of Lost Ark, and the way I describe this to my chat, and you can tell me if I'm high, but I say if it's a Reaper and a Deadeye had a child, and that's the class that got pooped out.
Reaper and Deadeye had a child. Yes. Okay,
cool. Dude, Grenton's always right.
Reaper. I would say the only adjustment I would make to that is like the Deadeye playstyle wise, but like not so much shotgunny, more like pistolier.
More pistolier, yeah, exactly. It's like pistolier, Deadeye, and Reaper had a child.
Yeah, pistolier, pistolier, yeah. I would agree with that.
What about Gunslinger? No one cares about Gunslinger.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're sweaty. Crossbow Dagger, we have it 5s across the board for PvE. I think this is pretty straightforward here, guys. They are the kings of DPS, and they are going to be top notch. And they might not have access to marker, but they help the marker. So when the marker is put on a target, every time someone crits when the marker is on the target, they are reducing cooldowns. And what better class to do that than Crossbow Dagger, right? Well, actually, I take that back. I guess bow crossbow could be better, but yeah. 5 out of 5 across the board there for PvE, which is going to take us to our next class. Another popular one here, Staff Dagger. I've given it 4-4 across the board in PvP, 3-3 and 3-4 in PvE respectively. JOEI, you've given it 5-5 in... Wait, did I read that right? Yeah, 5-5 in large scale and small scale PvP. And you've given it a 4-5 in arena. Grenton, you've given it a 5-5-5-5. I'm the only odd man out. I've given it a 4-4. Yeah, 4-5 in arena. Grenton, why don't you tell us, why have you given this a 5-5 in large scale and small scale PvP?
Yeah, so large scale, there's still inherent value into like the meteor meta, right? Obviously in tier 2 with Bellendir staff, it's just even stronger. It's not as wide as Flash Wave, obviously, but with a coordinated group, you can still, pull off some disgusting stuff. And obviously in earlier games as well, we kind of made use of that in Ethereum for Hyperboost Siege. We had a lot of staff daggers just kind of pelting groups and groups of people. And if you watch like any of the montages that our guild has posted, there's a lot of just multi-kill feeds from staff dagger players just being able to come out of stealth with 100% crit and just drop a meteor and kill people. And that's kind of the same reason it's really strong in small scale as well, is that your damage, it's so crazy to me that in this game, the one mage has actually like less casting time than like the melee assassin, Greatsword Dagger. Yeah. Everything is just instant cast on demand,
it's almost completely gone
for meteor.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you have AoE chain lightning all the time, AoE judgment all the time. I literally saw a clip where Dank, one of our staff daggers in our guild, that was actually against both of you. He used Judgment on Joey in Arena and just killed you in stealth.
Oh
because
yeah,
you were
yeah, I
next
remember
to
that.
him.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is so
good
silly.
Kanon.
Yeah, it's just so good. It's just good.
The casting time is affected by attack speed. So the higher your
Right.
attack speed, the
The lower
faster
your
you
casting
cast.
time.
Yeah. Joey, anything you want
But
to
yeah,
add?
it's just all around
sorry,
a good. No,
That's about it.
It's all around
It's
just
all
better.
spot on.
Yeah, I think it's just better in most situations than bow staff for small scale because you have the elusiveness of dagger. And there's what I did a tier list a while back, and what I said is if you have a dagger in your offhand, your skill as a player can put you up or down one tier on any tier list.
For sure.
So I feel like staff dagger is probably and crossbow dagger are the two most player dependent.
I will add a little bit of context here before giving my take, just so that you guys know, staff. Excuse me. One of the great things about staff, I mean, dagger goes without saying, but one of the great things about staff, especially in the current Korean endgame, is they compared to bow. Excuse me, they have access to more hit via buffs, right? So you do have windows where you're able to hit the target simply more compared to bow that doesn't have it. You do have a deadly marker that you can trade into bow, but chances are that motherfucker's gonna miss and you just don't get it. Versus versus staff, you get like an actual buff that can cut the hit differential by up to 600 hit/evasion, which is massive. Also, another huge boon when it comes to staff, especially staff dagger, is that it is very much especially in small scale, it's very much a SNS / Greatsword like meta. And those classes are again very subject. It depends on the builds and everything. Everything's subject to change. But a lot of those classes are subject to magic damage. More classes are subject to magic damage, I would say, on average than range. I wouldn't say by like an insane amount, but just, you know, if you're running Wraith, you're weak to magic for the most part, right? I think that's also a small little factor as well. Personally, if I were to tell you why I gave it a 4, I agree with 100%. I agree completely with the take and the breakdown. I think, again, surprise, experienced players kind of thinking of the same type of play style when it comes to these classes. I've simply given it a 4 out of 4 if we're talking about large scale, simply because I cannot justify staff dagger being better and more effective than a bow staff. I would rather take a bow staff. I cannot justify it being more impactful than a greatsword sword shield. Certainly not a healer tank. Okay, if we're to take that out and we're just to compare it to DPS, then I would also much rather take a bow dagger in large scale, simply because bow dagger has flash wave and tornado versus staff not having that. Now, is staff still incredibly good? Very, very good. Very close to a 5 rating. I would be happy with a 5 rating to kind of give you a little bit perspective here, but I'm simply putting it at a 4 because I think I value bow a little bit higher than it. That's the only reason why I've given it. Yeah. And I also do think that that they do get much better in smaller scale. But again, it's kind of like the same thing. I would probably give it like a 4.5 in this case, because there's just no, to me, there's no way staff dagger is on the same level as a greatsword dagger in like small scale skirmishes. Therefore, I cannot give it a 5. But it's kind of like up there. You know what I mean? Like, just because there's so many fucking greatsword daggers and greatsword SNSs, which also kind of strengthen crossbow with staff dagger. But that's pretty much why I've given my rating. I think staff dagger is one of the best classes in the game. It's incredibly powerful, but there's just, large scale specifically, it's more the tornado and flash wave.
I just want to add one very small thing. So the cool thing about staff dagger and bow dagger is that for the most part, and again, Joey, you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, your gear set's going to be very similar, which means if you really wanted to, and you're just like, oh, well, I don't really, and this is my sweaty ass thinking here, is that if I was playing bow dagger, I would level a staff, because if I ever play against a guild that I know stacks a lot of ranged, I'm just going to put the staff on so I could farm them. If I play against a guild that has like 3-4 Grentons running around as SNS dagger with 2400 magic evasion, maybe I'm not going to play my staff and I'll play my bow instead, right? So it just allows you the liberty of thrown in liberty. It allows you the liberty of switching between your weapons more freely if you do staff dagger, bow dagger. So you can kind of just have them all leveled.
Okay, so that's something that I was considering at first, but then I was like, you know what? Like, if we add that as a factor of the ratings, then this might be kind of.
Oh no, that was just a complete sidebar. Yeah, it has nothing to do with the ratings.
Yeah.
But that is. I'm glad you brought that up for those of you who are watching at home that are completely ignorant to Throne and Liberty. You maybe are doing it for the first time. Yes, there are 2 armor sets. Well, actually, there's probably more, but 2 that I'm certainly familiar with that are very versatile armor sets. One of them being Winged, which is the gear set that Grenton is talking about. You can use Bow Dagger, you can use Bow Staff, and you can use Staff Dagger with that gear set. It increases your damage based off your critical damage based off of the distance, up to 40% critical damage. So it's like the most amount of critical damage that you could actually get, but you obviously need to maintain the distance, and it can be changed. Like you can change your weapon if you have that set. So it is, yes, you could absolutely just play Staff Dagger for small scale, and then just if you have that extra weapon, have that extra bow, you can swap that in there and then play Bow Staff for long range. You could absolutely do that. And by the way, the other one that you're wondering is Wraith. Wraith is a fantastic versatile set. That's the other set that's very versatile. Okay, anything else that we want to add? Oh, PvE. We all have PvE. We all have Staff Dagger falling off in PvE a little bit, right? None of us have really put it at a 5. We've got like 3, 4 across the board. Do you want to finish up the Staff Dagger conversation here with PvE, Grenton?
Sure. No bow, no bitches.
Okay.
No bow, no bitches.
That's pretty much it. It has damage, right? Because of staff and dagger, and I've seen like charged fireballs hit for like 40, 50k times 2. But like as a group, that deadly marker will do more damage than that.
Yeah.
Just because of the CDR. So that's pretty much it.
All right, Joey, anything you want to add in general?
Nope. Nothing much.
Okay.
Other than, it's all spot on.
All right, let's move on.
For the PvE.
We're going to Staff Wand, and for the purpose of this video, we'll go ahead and kind of talk about both DPS versions and support. But let's start with support. From a support perspective in PvP across the board, I have it as a 5-5. Joey, you do 2, and Grenton, you do 2. Joey, why is this a perfect 5-5 in PvP?
PvP?
Yeah.
Because one, if you have the staff, you can hook back your teammates, pull them away from risk. Let's say you have a diver, like you have a tank diving in, and he's low, he's used all of his cooldowns and everything. He can then get pulled back by the healer. So long as he's not prone or anything, he'll be able to get pulled back to safety by the healer and sustained. But that's something that the bow wand cannot do.
Yes, that is a standout difference. Grenton, anything you want to add?
So on top of just the pull, Staff Wand has some of the best utility in the game through Smokescreen. If you spec it to do the tripod, that allows you to cast it. So you actually have a lot of peel that you can do for your group. Frost Smokescreen.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I should have. Not the dagger one.
I was like,
the staff one.
Screen? Yeah.
Okay. Instead of blinking, you're placing it, right? Again, this is just because we utilized it in Siege, where we were using it on the wall breach, on the choke, where people were just running in and getting rooted in tier 2 because of the Black Gale staff. And even in tier 1, it just provides a really good slow. Icebound Tomb's a phenomenal self-peel. And even if you're built support Staff Wand, you still have good on-demand damage.
Yes.
So if your group goes in and there's like a guy at like 10% health, 5% health, a quick judgment, he dies.
Yeah.
So it has less throughput healing-wise than Bow Wand, but it has more everything else than Bow Wand. That's why I put them on the exact same tier, because it's kind of like a pick your poison as a healer. You want to be a true just support. I'm going to blast heals into my team. Bow Wand. You want to be have a bit more agency, have some utility, and have some damage. Then you go Staff Wand.
I agree with that. The only thing that I would add is that, yes, there is a little bit of a hybrid factor with, hey, I can deal damage as well. It seems like there's more peel potential, some utility with the staff. The only thing I would add is that there still is, in case you don't know, there is synergy between staff and wand for healers. Yes, bow wand is hands down the highest healing output, but that's not to say that staff does not help your healing output for your wand. Sorry. Yeah.
You literally have you have a passive. Yeah, you have a passive that just gives you skill damage boost, and skill damage, ironically enough, actually increases your healing because healing scales off damage.
Right. You also get more heavy attack, which could proc heals, and you also have scaling off of your additional healing power that also scales off of your max mana as well from your staff. So it is, but just additional context here. Before the skill specialization, staff wand was the king healer. It was the best healer in the game, and then they juiced the fuck out of bow wand with skill specialization. Both very, very viable. We all agree that they're 5/5 across the board. You guys have also given it a 5/5 in PvE. This isn't going to take too long. I will just tell you the only reason why I don't have it out of the 5/5 is because it's not a bow. That's like, but I'm fine. Like, I think every healer and across all content, it's a 5/5. It's fine. You're just healing, but yeah, because it doesn't have bow, you don't have the potential to add marker. Therefore, I would take bow staff, or excuse me, wand.
Bow wand.
Yeah, sorry. Bow wand. I would take bow wand. I think it's better. So that's why I gave it a 4/4. Okay. Oh, DPS. Some people want to know about damage. DPS. Grenton, what would you give this as a DPS, as a damage focused class?
It has really good damage. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I'd probably put it in, like, I'd just mimic the wand dagger ratings, I think, in terms of it, because it does damage differently, but it kind of serves the same purpose. It just does damage from range, but you have less escapes because you don't have a dagger. I still wouldn't, as a shot caller, ever want a staff wand DPS in my main ball. I'll just heal, bro, and have some damage on the side.
Right.
But it does respectable damage, for actually probably above respectable damage if I had to actually put it on paper.
Joey, what do you think about staff wand as a damage dealer?
Depends on your bank account.
Yeah, valid.
If you have two Belendir staff and a Tevent wand, then yeah, you're definitely gonna do some damage, some serious damage, and sustain yourself and your party. You can definitely make it work, but it really depends on your bank account, bro. Because early game, you're not gonna have both of those arch bosses to even
or if you
try
can convince your guild to give them to you.
Staff wand for me, guys. Damage staff wand. I've actually seen staff wand in practice. I have a good friend of mine. His name is Staparu. Shout outs to my guy Staparu. He actually plays a DPS staff wand, and he plays it very effectively. So I've seen it in practice. I would say staff wand is essentially the same role as bow staff. Which is a class that gets better the larger the scale, but starts to fall off the smaller the scale. If we are talking about large scale, I would probably give it about a 3 in tier 1 and a 4 in tier 2 with BIS, because like Joey said, if you have if you have Queen Tevent combination, your AoE damage, you can deal damage, especially if you have a line. You will have range and you can deal some serious damage, which is why I would give it a 4. In tier 1, when you don't have arc boss weapons, obviously you just don't have that as much damage output. However, I still think it's pretty effective and can be pretty effective. But if you think about this, almost every weapon in large scale, if you have a line and you're protected, almost every weapon in the game can be effective. At the end of the day, it's like, it's the same role as a bow staff, but it's more of a hybrid with off heals and a curse bomb potential versus pure damage output. And as a commander, I would absolutely take bow staff over a staff wand DPS any day of the week. I would.
Just one thing to add for the PvE side, because I saw chat mentioning it. It doesn't have Deadly Mark, but it does have a tripod. Sorry, Lost Ark Andy. A skill specialization that you can put on for high focus, that instead of giving yourself hit and evasion, you give your entire party cooldown reduction. So there is a party-wide buff for staff wand. So if you are more interested in staff wand, that's I think why I put it at 5, and I just forgot it now. Because that is it. When I was playing staff SNS and I had a staff wand in my party, we would just alternate when we were popping that high focus. So we just had more CDR for the group, and it felt really nice.
Okay. Let's talk about Wand Dagger. This is the last weapon on the list. Did I add this to the list? I can't remember if this was on the list. I think it was on the list. I've given this a 3-3-4-4-5-5. Joey, you've given this a 4-4-4-4-5-5. And Grenton, you've given it a 3-3-4-4-5-5. Okay, we'll talk about Arena last, but I think when it comes to large scale, small scale, 3-3-4-4-4-4-4-5-5-5-5. Grenton, it's kind of gone up.
You looked at my staff dagger one.
Oh, sorry. Shit. You're right. 3-3-4-4. So Grenton and I are in agreement with this being a 3-3-4-4. Joey, you're the odd man out. you've given it a 4/4 in large scale. I get the feeling I know why, but why don't you tell us why?
Everyone needs a sleeper.
Yeah.
Everyone needs rest. You need to go to sleep sometime. And the Wand Dagger is perfect right there. It's gonna put you to sleep.
It sure will.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's
it sure will. So for me,
it.
guys, I'll go ahead and follow up with it. For me, I've given it a 3/3 in large scale because it is very okay. So the way the role that Wand Dagger fills is it's there to set up bombs and can also be the bomber, but it requires a setup, and the DPS is very low. What I mean by DPS, I mean damage per second. You're very bursty, but you're not constantly dealing damage. So this would be like opposite to like a bow staff where your DPS is just constant, right? So Wand Dagger, you have to be very, very good at finding clumps of people that can be bursted, and you need to be able to execute that properly. That, in my opinion, is easier said than done. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There's a reason why you don't see montages, constant montages, like where you see in a single video, you don't see like 20 of these bombs back to back to back every single day, right? You might see a montage with like 4 or 5, maybe even up to 10, but you're not going to see another one for a while just because this is much more difficult to set up than you think. And it's even more difficult in the current endgame with Tornado and Collision that can knock you out of your stealth. And there are certainly plenty of choke points when it comes to large scale and GVGs where you can't actually flank, right? So for all of these reasons, even though in theory a Wand Dagger could single-handedly change the course of a fight with a huge significant play, I just don't think that play comes out enough. And it's and I think that play is very difficult to make happen for the most part in large scale. That is the reason why I've given it a 3/3 and a 4/4 in small scale PvP. Grenton, why did you give it a 3/3 4/4?
Pretty much the same reason. It's very player dependent. Shocker, something that has a dagger is player dependent. If I was comparing it, we had one very, 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 actually two very scary Wand Daggers in our guild for Hyper Boost, which was Rylok and Nim. Mm-hmm. If I had just a bunch of Ryloks and Nims, I would rate this at a 4 or 5 in large scale because they were consistently getting sleeps off. But what you're saying about tier 2, especially some of these boss arenas, there's not a lot of opportunities to flank unless you want to go from like a completely separate zone and like fly in. Shout out my boy Pakilo and his really weird boss room. But it makes that a lot harder. So in tier 1, I feel like you don't really have a lot of damage as Wand Dagger, but you can set up sleeps quite easy. And in tier 2, you have more damage, but now sleeps become harder to set up. So that's kind of why I rated them both the same. And then again, like Greatsword Dagger, the smaller the scale, the more deadly this Wand Dagger is because there's less variables you need to take into account, and you can kind of get your combo off more consistently.
Right. Guys, you have it at a perfect 5/5 in arena. And so do I. Okay, so we don't really have to talk about. I think when it comes,
it's disgustingly strong.
I would be okay with actually giving it a 4 in the arena simply because it uses a wand spot. You know what I mean? Like I would if I'm going, because you can only have one on a team. I would much rather have like a full blown defensive wand staff, wand bow, or even wand SNS over a Wand Dagger. And that doesn't mean Wand Dagger is worse. It's just anytime I would rather have a different class than this, to me, I can't really justify being a perfect rating. So for me, it was kind of like in between because like in its own, it's extremely good. But like even from a DPS perspective, it's like you can blow up someone, but you can't blow up people as often as Greatsword Dagger. So like for me, it was kind of a back and forth between 4/4, 5/5. But I think we can all agree it's incredibly strong even in the arena, right?
Yeah. The only thing I'll add for arena is while having a staff bow a staff wand or a bow wand is objectively better for healing, Wand Dagger, it's really weird to explain, but can kill targets solo, which will then make the damage your group is taking less, which will mean the healing this Wand Dagger has to do is less. Like I've seen Wand Daggers on my team and against me who maybe finish like 40-50% of what a regular healer would finish in terms of raw numbers, but they have like 7 kills to their name. So it's like, okay, well, yeah, you healed less, but you also made sure we took less damage because you're just killing people the whole time, right? So that's kind of why I have them ranked the same. because it's again you're healing by killing people, which
Sure.
is like a weird thing to say. But
Right. So PvE, this is a little interesting one, and I've given it a 1 out of 1. 1-1, not 1 out of 1. Sorry, Joey, you've given it a 3-3, 3-3, and Grenton, you've given it a 3-3, 3-3. Okay, I simply gave this a 1 for, and I think both these guys are going to agree with me here. Here's why: if you queue Wand Dagger into a dungeon, first of all, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to find a group. Okay. Second of all, if you are actually playing damage-based Wand Dagger, you're not dealing you have very low DPS. Okay, so it's, I would say, one of the probably the worst DPS class in the game for PvE. If you are playing for DPS, and if you're playing for healer, then sorry, it's a healer. People will if you're using a wand, even as dagger, people will expect you to use healer, which would be a different rating. And because I wrote this rating, because I wrote this specifically as a damage dealer, I've given it a 1 out of 1. Because as a damage dealer, it's a 1 out of 1. I think any wand user that's a healer, it's totally fine across all forms of PvE. But I've given it that 1 out of 1 for that reason. I'm not sure why you guys gave it a 3. I'm assuming because you guys are thinking like, okay, just heal. But I don't know. I'll let you guys explain.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick.
Ahead.
So obviously Wand Dagger, and I want to preface this, we're talking about DPS Wand Dagger for these ratings.
Yes,
We're not talking about healer Wand
DPS.
Dagger. Healer Wand Dagger, I would put it at like a 4 for this. It's just a really good healing healer. The crit's nice. Anyway, but for DPS,
mana issues, I don't know. It used to have mana issues.
I mean, there's enough Fury attacks in these dungeons now with Dagger Block that'll allow you to kind of just get that mana back. I don't think it has much mana issues. I mean, Rylock's in your chat.
I suppose you could build for it too, if we are talking about.
Yeah, you can also build like mana regen and stuff like that. But anyways, for the damage perspective, in a world where the bow meta is here for PvE, I'm assuming this Wand Dagger is going to be playing with at least 2 bows in their party, which means the consistency of these curse bombs are going to come more often.
Sure.
Yeah, that's why I have it rated more than 1. Because if there was no bows and you're just getting 1 curse bomb off every 30 seconds, then you're doing no damage.
Okay, so
if you're getting them more off.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. Now, personally, I haven't seen them. I haven't seen it done in that regard. Have you? Or is this kind of like a theory crafting what if type of?
I haven't seen many.
Same.
Usually Wand Daggers are playing healers.
Yeah. Usually, if you go Wand Dagger as a damage, you might get kicked. Just because of that stereotype of Wand Dagger DPS, get out of here. You're trolling. That there is that type of mindset. Joey, what do you think? You got it out of 3-3 as well for PvE.
Oh yeah, I tried to queue with that when on hyper. Was that CBT? I remember playing CBT with it. Nobody wants.
You couldn't find a group.
Nobody.
But
wants
why did you give it a 3-3?
Because you can still heal.
Oh, okay, so that was on.
There's gonna be desperate groups out there. Oh, we can't find a healer. He's the only choice we have. Get him in.
Take him. Get him in here.
With a frown on their face. They're sad.
It doesn't take much to actually heal in these dungeons, especially at the current endgame. All right, guys. Well, listen. We just went through the whole fucking list in an hour and 27 minutes. That was not bad. I tried to do it in an hour, and we got an hour and a half. That's pretty good. Is there anything else that you guys want to add or bring up and discuss before we close this one out?
Yeah, stop hitting tanks when they have 3 rows of blue buffs. That's it. That is. I will leave you with that.
Yeah, you might be actually healing them, literally.
Yeah, exactly. Nerf Greatsword and Nerf Wand.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do this. Actually, Joey, is there anything else you want to add to this before we round this out?
No, everything sounds good.
Okay, so let's do this. All things considered.
Yeah.
I'm not giving you context here. Just all things considered. When it comes to, let's just say PvP, okay? PvP specifically, all things considered, what is the best weapon, the best class in the game? No context, no explanation. SNS Wand?
Yeah, easily.
Joey, what's the best class in the game?
Paladin.
What?
Paladin? Is that what you said?
Yeah, Paladin.
SNS Wand?
SNS Wand. Yeah.
Okay. SNS1 for me too. Okay, guys.
It's crazy.
That's
It's not
it.
even close.
I mean, Greatsword SNS is pretty close.
No, it's not even like
It's pretty
you can.
close. It's
if
pretty
you- if-
close. Not like within
it's not even
1%. Not within 1%. But it's
No,
like,
no, it's like 10, 15%
okay,
maybe.
Here's
but-
what I'll say. SNS1 is here. Okay. Everything else is here, and Greatsword SNS is like here. That's
Sure,
what I would say.
I can agree with that.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Because there's a big space between SNS Greatsword and everything else too. I feel like there's a decent gap.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that
for
100%,
sure.
absolutely, yeah.
And for our PvE Andes, what best class, best weapon class in the game for PvE? Joey.
Best class for PvE?
Yeah.
Crossbow Dagger.
Crossbow Dagger. Grenton?
Yeah, crossbow. I think crossbow dagger or bow crossbow.
I would say the same. You can only choose one though.
Bow crossbow actually.
I'll go bow
Deadly
crossbow
mark
as
is more
well.
valuable.
I'll go bow
Yeah.
crossbow as well. I agree. Boys and girls, thank you so much for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out these guys in the Jesus Christ. Please check out their socials and their channels. All of their links can be found in the description below. I will try my best with timestamp. If you guys are watching this right now and there's no timestamps, I apologize. It's very difficult to go through the entire video again because I'm not like writing notes. I should write notes. But anyways, yeah, guys, drop a follow, drop a sub to these guys. They're both streaming on both Twitch and they're uploading content on YouTube. These guys are going to be fantastic. They are and going to be a fantastic source of information for Throne and Liberty. So don't forget to check them out. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.